Hi everyone, I just wanted to give you a quick and dirty lowdown on what happened at the Early Learning and Childcare Funding Formula Approach Engagement Workshop today. So it happened from 1 to 4. They're having their last few ones and then they're closing the survey on December 8th. So I'm just going to start with my notes. Again, this is quick and dirty. I just came home and threw this quickly together because it's really important to get the information to you so you can get your feedback to the government. So Anne Clayton, who's the executive director, just gave an overview of what's happening with our province. She said that they want to ask what needs to be asked or give a platform for that and to ask people to share what needs to be shared. So first of all, she said that this new affordability grant fact sheet that came out is not the new funding formula. It's something that's going to be in place from January of next year until March of the year after that. They have not developed a new funding formula. They are going through that process right now. So this is not the funding formula that's going to launch. It's like a temporary placeholder. They also said that your feedback is really crucial. So please fill in that survey, hopefully on Thursday, by Friday at the very latest, because that is when it closed. So they reminded us that November 2021 is when Alberta and Canada signed the Early Learning and Childcare Agreement, $3.8 billion, with, of course, the goal of quality, affordability, flexibility, and inclusive childcare, regardless of where someone lives. They have expanded this model to include for-profit childcare spaces. So that's 26,000 or more for-profit childcare spaces. And it's only focusing on ages 0 to kindergarten. They also reminded everyone that all family day homes are considered not for profit. So if you are regulated with a licensed agency, you're considered to be not for profit. What else did they say? They said when this agreement came into place, the fees were about $44 a day. They want to get it down to $15 a day and eventually $10 a day. But because of the lower cost, we're having increased enrollment and longer wait lists. So now the space creation and grant includes private operators to better represent Alberta's mixed model. They're also doing a pilot project in Calgary. So it's essentially a pipeline of recent immigrants that they're putting through early childhood education training so that we can have more early childhood educators. So I'm very curious to see how that will work. It sounds like an interesting initiative. And by March 2026, early childhood will be primarily funded by the government. So again, 26,200 private or for-profit spaces and 42,500 family day home and nonprofit spaces. They did say that people would have the ability to operate as a licensed program without public funding. But again, if you're a family day home and you want to become licensed, you can only go through an agency. And as far as I know, and I'm pretty clear, there are no agencies that have opted out of the funding. And we'll come back to that towards the end of this, hopefully brief presentation. All right, so they talked about core versus optional costs. And unfortunately, they compared it to a plane ticket. So several people at my table were like, that makes me sick. Like, that's not an amazing comparison. So they essentially said, when you buy a plane ticket, you can buy a normal plane ticket or a luxury plane ticket. So a core service, a normal plane ticket would be like safe and maintained. You have a place to sit. You might have water or pop. This is literally what they said. And they said, or you can have luxury, right? So first class seats and leg room. So that's how they compared it. And again, I have serious concerns about that kind of a two-tiered system because of the issues for children whose parents cannot afford what they call luxury. And we know that investing in early childhood is not luxury. All right. Okay, so I wanted to mention that I was sitting at a table with agencies from Edmonton, and I just really wanted to clearly point out that high quality agencies are fighting hard for educator needs. They're taking time out of their days. They're super passionate. They brought up really great points that I hadn't thought of. They're fighting for educators. And I think it should be said there's also some agencies that weren't there. Maybe they couldn't be there. Maybe there was a different reason that they weren't there, but there are agencies that are really fighting so that educators can get what they need. All right, so Here is some of the notes that we put down. So some of it was a discussion, and it was literally the exact funding formula paper that you can find online. It was the online survey that they're wanting people to fill out. Please fill it out. So here's some of the things that our table mentioned. They talked about funding things like cribs and napping supplies. So I think those things are really great. Resources for special occasions and maybe day home field trips. Funding for inclusion resources and materials and family events like barbecues or celebrations, cultural holiday celebrations. So these are all what I think are really great ideas. Most of the ones in orange are mine. And if you've seen my previous videos, you've heard me talk about this before. All of the previous feedback suggestions can be found on the website. And again, there's some new feedback suggestions in this, hopefully, brief video. All right, what else did we talk about? Vacation funding. Educators need to take vacations. We need to have funding for backup care, ideally through the agency, so the agency can provide that backup care. Wage top up for hours claimed, not with a cap. So we need to get the wage top up for the hours that they work. What else? And some agencies wanted different things, right? So one agency wanted like 12 visits a year or more. Yeah, so that's some things that were recommended. For residence funding, things like fire extinguishers, furnace filters, smoke detectors. For the agency, vehicle maintenance, because they're driving around to educator homes, right? So lots of great ideas on here. Health and safety, radon kits, which was a new thing for me. I hadn't heard of that before. So different things you might want to consider when you're looking at the residence funding. They also talked about funding for things like time saver or accounting software, funding for advertising and marketing. And my hope would be that educators and agencies would get that funding. Things like photocopying, laminating, printing. So not everyone has their own printer. You might have to go to Staples. Oh, this is the same as last slide. That's okay. There's something new on here. So regular upkeep, right? So new flooring, like new paint, new play spaces as you need them. So that's something important to consider. Okay, this was here again as well. So you can see I was pretty time strapped when I threw this together. These are a couple of the points that I brought up. So what happens if a family gives notice on the 31st and the educator/agency gets nothing? So one bright and experienced woman said that years ago, what used to happen was the government would cover that 2 weeks notice. So that's a really big issue. And we know that there are some families that are going to cause a problem at a center-based care or a day home. They're just going to switch with no notice to a new place and kind of keep doing that for whatever reason. And that leaves the agency or the child care center in the lurch. So if the government could fund for that, then the educator and or the agency or child care center wouldn't have to suck up that cost. I also asked repeatedly or just mentioned the tax implications for family day homes and how the boundaries of that contract or relationship are being violated. So they didn't really have an answer for that, but they said it's something that has come up and they're taking it into consideration. I also talked about how part-time spaces are becoming way more expensive than full-time spaces, or they're even unavailable. So some agencies might not allow them to happen. Some daycares might not offer part-time spaces anymore. But that's not supporting family needs. And I mentioned this question that was posed in Facebook. So if we have more childcare spaces, are we going to have more licensing officers, not offers? And the answer was yes, we are getting more licensing officers across the province. Okay, so here's one new feedback idea that I think is really important and a good idea. So day homes traditionally undercharge. We undercharge and we don't get the wage top up for all the hours we work. We don't get any kind of monetary compensation for all the hours that we work that are outside of formal childcare hours. So I honestly think that rather than a maximum fee, day homes should have to charge a minimum fee. If you're running a day home right now, again, the fees range from about $600 to $1,400 or even $1,500 up in Fort McMurray. I do not believe that $850 is enough. We didn't really land on a number. I'm just spitballing. I'm going to say like $1,000 as a minimum fee, and that's not including the agency fee. So that might be something you want to consider in your feedback, because right now so many people are locked into fees that are way too low. So again, these are some of the questions that people wanted answered, and I've talked about some of them already. So a lot of them just didn't have answers, right? The part-time versus full-time, the tax implications, and the boundaries of contracting, or sorry, of a business relationship are being violated. So they didn't really have answers, but it was good to get people's voices heard. I talked about licensing officers, and someone asked about out-of-school care. So they're just really clear this funding is about birth to kindergarten aged. They're not considering children between the ages of 6 to 12 at this time. Okay, so one important question that I wanted to raise was, how can day home educators contact the government? They pretty much drew a blank. They could not give me a phone number. They could not give me an email. They were very kind. They said, I don't want to give the wrong information, but they suggested using Child Care Connect, because that can get you to a licensing officer. So if you are a day home educator and you don't know the phone number of your licensing officer, use Child Care Connect and let me know how that goes, because I'd be really, really curious. I also mentioned, and because this made me angry, so they said in the funding formula discussion paper, they're aware of this issue of unequal caps and unequal grants between center-based care and day homes. But now that we have this temporary, funding formula or funding fact sheet in place, that's just continuing. So day homes are getting a fraction of what daycares are. I just raised it as a serious concern. And they kind of nodded and were like, but they didn't really say anything. They just said they've heard that from others before. So hopefully in 2026, that will get figured out. And this is a private message that someone sent me from Facebook. So I've been learning so much stuff about how other people run things. It's very interesting. Sometimes it's mind-boggling. So this person wrote me. She runs a day home with an agency in Alberta. And she said, how is it that some lower full-time fees in Edmonton, like $950, including the agency fee, can be cut to $800? And how can some agencies charge like $1,200 and some have to drop fees to $800? So I emailed her back and I was like, are you sure? Like, is this actually happening? She's like, yes. She's like, mine is. We were at $950 for full-time, including agency fee. And now they're going to be at $800, including agency fee. She's like, I can't believe it. So parents are essentially getting on $100 or $150 additional, and then $117 for the grant difference, and our wages cut. And she gave exact numbers, and it was something shocking, like $10,000 a year. So I talked about it with the people at my table, because it was honestly hard for me to even wrap my head around this. Like, I felt like that cannot be true. It seems very wrong. But yeah, it turns out that this is true. And I'm not saying this person was making it up. I just was like, my brain cannot compute, like, how is that possible? But it actually is. And yeah, this is true. So they mentioned many times that additional fees cannot be added to the fees that were approved. So they can't change it. It's signed right now. We talked about it at my table. And by the way, again, there was really high quality agencies. 4 different agencies were represented at my table. And some of them I've had a relationship with for years. So it was wonderful to connect with people again. One person that I greatly admire said that the agencies had no choice but to sign, because I said educators didn't have a choice. Nobody asked us. And she said agencies didn't have a choice either. She said if we did not sign, if we opted out of the 3% cap and freeze, we opted out of everything, like the wage top up, the PD, the release time funding, everything. They tied it all up in a knot. If you said, no, we're not doing that, you didn't get any of it. And then the agency would go out of business. Like, nobody would go with the agency if they couldn't offer the wage top up. And so they brought that up as a serious concern, because it was like they were being bent over backwards, right? Like, they were being strong-armed into this. It's a problem. She also said that agencies had to decide on a number. So when this paperwork came out, it was like, well, how much is your fee? Like, how much is the average fee? Because we have to figure out this cap. So some took an average, and if their educators charged on the lower end of things, that average was lower. And if more educators charged the higher fee, that number was higher. She also reminded me that this all happened in COVID times, right? And when we were kind of ending the pandemic. So first of all, there's some educators that have been working for like 25 years with their fee staying pretty much exactly the same. Now they can't raise it. Others lowered their fees during COVID to, provide softer padding for the parents. And then right when the pandemic ended, the agency was like, hey, do you want to raise your fees? We recommend it. And they were like, no, like parents are already having a hard time. I don't want to make it even harder. Yeah. And so that's where the government locked us in when all of those things were going on. So it's really unfortunate. And we did offer feedback about that. At our table, we agreed that there's so much variance in agencies all across Alberta. It's not just in some locations. And so we agree agencies need more accountability, transparency, and clear minimum requirements. They cannot be allowed to withhold wage top-up. Some agencies are, apparently. I learned so much at this meeting. You cannot say that no part-time spaces are allowed, that no backup care is allowed, or that no vacations are allowed. Like an agency cannot say that. It violates the relationship and it goes above and beyond what's appropriate, or really, I would say even what's legal, considering that we are self-employed. All right, so we are wrapping up. Your feedback is crucial. That was their key message. They need your feedback. Please, please, please fill in the survey. This is the last video that I'm going to make on this. I am begging you for your own day home, for day homes across the province, please give them your feedback by December 8th. So that pretty much means tomorrow. Like, please do it Thursday. If you don't do it Thursday, do it Friday. But remember, they didn't put a timestamp on this. I don't know if that thing closes at noon, at 5 p.m., at midnight. I'm hoping it closes at midnight on Friday. But what if you decide to leave it to the end of the day and you've lost your chance? Fill in the feedback survey, please. The video feedback, the feedback suggestions, all of these videos are posted on my website. You can also find like a copy and paste feedback suggestion form there. Take what you like, leave what you don't. Even if you go into this survey and you're like, I only have one thing to say, put that one thing in there and then press submit and you're done. So I'm going to get up off my soapbox. I'm going to finish my long day. I really hope that you found this helpful. And I really hope that you fill in that survey. Thank you so much for the hard work you do. Have a wonderful evening.